Hi, this is Alexandra with Beadaholique, here to show you how to make the Fresca Beaded Fringe earring kits by Beadaholique. This kit comes in three really fun colors. We've got Orange Crush, we've got Blue Lagoon, and we've got the Pink Lady. In this video, we'll be making the Orange Crush version, and when you purchase this kit from Beadaholique, you'll receive everything you see here, including a pair of wireframe hoops, a pair of matching earring hooks. You'll get 4 colors of size 11-0 round seed beads, 15 yards of the crystal fireline in the 4-pound test. You'll also receive full illustrated instructions on the circular brick stitch process and written instructions as well. What you'll need are a few simple tools, including a size 12 needle, scissors, thread snips, or a thread zap, and some chain nose pliers. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin, I have threaded 2.5 feet of the fire line onto my size 12 needle. The first thing I'm going to do is pull some of these green beads in, and we're going to do circular brick stitch around a form using these beads. So let me take my wire frame here and show you that there's a front side with the wire singular and then a back side that shows the tip of the wire, which looks a little less finished. Now, of course, you can decide which is the front and back to your eye. Maybe you like it more artisan looking, you could have it on that side. Either way, I'm going to begin and work clockwise from the right. So I'm bringing my thread through the hoop from behind and tying a knot around the frame. Once and twice, and I want that knot to land right up against the frame there. I'm going to string on 2 of my green beads and pull them down against the hoop. There we go. Now, in order to get these beads to lay flat, what I need to do is come through the hoop again from behind, and I need to loop up underneath my right hand bead. And when I pull upward, that's going to lay my bead flat down against the hoop. Now, the other little bead is still kind of slanted, so what I'll need to do is come down through that one, and then up through the right hand bead once more, and that underlying thread bridge is going to flatten both beads out really nicely. So at that point I can grip the little tail and place those beads where I want, and I've begun my brick stitch weaving. So I'm going to take on my next bead, pull it down against the hoop, come through the back of the hoop, up through the bead, and you'll see I'm heading from right to left through that bead. And that positions the thread just so to pull the bead into position. Okay, next bead on. You'll see I have a method for pulling the bead down between my fingers to get it in place, and you'll find what's comfortable for you. Coming right to left through that next bead, pulling it down. And we'll do a couple more. Through the back, right to left, and pull tight. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and fill the entire edge of my wire frame in the same manner, and when I get to the other side, we'll go ahead to the next step. So I'm just coming up to the other end of my frame, continuing to add beads all the way through. Oops, I got the wrong bead there. Let me make sure I have the right one. And coming right to left. There we go. Along the outer edge of your hoop, you'll be adding approximately 48 beads. The reason that I say approximate is because of the nature of circular brick stitch. Sometimes the beads require filling in a little more space. You'll notice I'm coming all the way up onto the rounded edge of that wire just to make sure I cover the whole thing. And in order to achieve that, I'm coming down through the hoop again, you see, but I need to come up and around in order to achieve that final stitch. And so I'm just working it into position where I need alongside that loop, which is just a little bit in my way. But what that does is it just covers the whole thing very nicely. All right, so I've got all my beads on and I'm ready to tie a knot. So I'm going to take the tail from my other side and I'm going to take the thread I was working with and I'm going to tie the two together. And you'll notice that I'm tying it kind of against and underneath that side with the edge of the loop, which I'm calling the back side of my earring. And for security, I'm going to go ahead and make a surgeon's knot where I come around once and twice. And then further, I'm actually going to make one more knot on top just to make sure it's secure. Now, if you like, you can weave each end of your thread in through your brick stitch, but I'm going to go ahead and clip. You would probably also want to leave yourself more of a tail than I did. Maybe 6 inches would be good, so I apologize about that, but we made it work. So I'm taking my scissors and I'm just going to clip the threads off. And we've completed our first row of weaving. So now, to begin the next one, what we're going to do is take in our fire line. First I'll get my green beads out of the way, and I'll be starting on the row of gold beads. So I'm going to take my fire line and cut 5.5 feet. Oops. There we go. Bring my ruler in. Measure. And by taking such a long length, what I'm doing is eliminating the need for adding new thread as I go, because that can be rather tedious and you can start to see the knots. So we'll be able to continue all the way through the fringe with this length. So I'm going to thread that on to my needle. And I'm going to go ahead and pull so that a lot of my thread is overlapping itself, and that way I'll just have less length to deal with. My starting place for this is going to be between the 11th and 12th bead down. So what I'm going to do is count 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I've got my 11th bead and I'm coming through from behind under that thread bridge between the 11th and 12th bead. I'm pulling my thread through and I'm going to tie another knot. And this time I'll leave myself just a little more tail to work with. So tying on like so, and I'm ready to start my second row of brick stitch. Here's a little tip. I'm actually going to take the tail and stitch it underneath my next row just to secure it. I found in practicing that it sort of falls that way and it lends itself to securing in that method. So for the next, I'm going to take in my gold beads, string on 2 beads, and bring them all the way down, and then take the needle and bring it underneath that same thread bridge where we made our knot. Once I've got those secured, I'm coming up from right to left through the right hand bead, and then to secure the left hand bead, I'm coming down through it, and once more back up through the right hand bead. There's our beginning of our second row, and as I go along, I'm going to trap my little tail in there, take on my next bead, come through the adjacent thread bridge, stitch up and through. So I'm going to continue on this row, and once I get maybe 7 or 8 beads in, I will trim this little tail off. And I'm adding approximately 29 beads on this row. When I get to the end, we'll move on to the white row. So I've completed my second row of brick stitch and added on my 29th bead. Now the way that I know that these are even is I went ahead and counted down 11 beads from the top down this side the same way that I did the opposite side. So I came up the same thread bridge, and that's gotten me even. So to start my third row, I'm going to take on 2 white beads. I'm going to look at these thread bridges, and I'm skipping the first one here, and I'm going to come underneath from behind the second thread bridge. Now I'm looking at how these beads lay, and what I want to do is come up underneath my left hand bead, down from the top of the right hand bead, and once again up through my left hand bead, and that's going to lay my beads nice and flat on a slight decrease. And because it's a decrease, this is actually going to be the same number of beads as the first one. I know it's going to be 29 beads. So I'm ready to take on my next bead, come through the next thread bridge, and head up through the bead, and I'm resuming my brick stitch. So I'm going to continue this all the way along my gold beaded section, and once I complete this row, we will go on to the next step. All right, so I'm continuing to add beads, and what I wanted to show you here is that you can notice my thread is starting to get a little bit long on this thread bridge, and my bead is tilting up like so. It's getting a little bit scrunched. And so what I want to do with my next bead is I'm actually going to go under the same thread bridge as I did for the previous bead. And this is what I was speaking about for the variability that can happen in circular brick stitch or brick stitch on a form. And so what I want to do is just the same thing as usual. I'm going to come up and under my next bead, but it's going to land that bead just a tad bit closer and slightly tilted against the previous one. So I just want to get my tension as relaxed and flat as possible to line those beads up, and what that's given me is some extra room to work on the next thread bridge. So once again, I'm going to continue, and we'll get to the next step after this. Now that I've completed the white third layer of my brick stitch, I'm ready to add the fringe. So to do that, I'm going to begin by adding 7 beads of these orange. That's going to be our smallest loop. You'll see I'm coming out of my final bead. I've added my beads on, and I'm going to come back through the same bead. Now I'm going to come up through the adjacent white bead to the left. And this time I'm going to add on 9 beads. So each loop is going to work in an increase of 2. Got 1 extra bead there. There we go. Okay, coming back through the same bead. They'll start to stack really nicely against themselves. Coming up through the adjacent bead. I'll be adding on 11 beads. And coming through the same bead. So in this fashion, I'm going to create the graduated portion of my fringe by increasing by 2 beads on each loop. Now I'm going to do that until I get up to 23 beads, which is 9 white beads down. Once I've gotten to 23, I'm going to move on with you, and we're going to add 25 consecutive loops to a certain point. So let's get up to 23 and then we'll move on. So here I've added 9 loops of fringe, starting with 7 beads and increasing by 2 until I've gotten to 23 beads. On this strand here I have 25, and I'm ready to loop back through the same bead that I exited from. Moving in toward the center of the hoop. That's my first loop of 25. Now what I want to point out here is that I know that I added 29 beads around on the white row, and I've come down 9, so my 25 beads are on the 10th bead. I've gone ahead and counted. I know that I'm going to have 11 fringe loops that are 25 beads each, and the way I figured that out was by counting 9 down from this side, so that each of them is going to match the count on the opposite edge of the hoop. So I went down 9 and figured out where I'd need to stop doing 25s and start the decrease. All right, so in case you've added or subtracted 1 bead on this edge, you'll want to add or subtract 1 loop of 25 in your fringe in order to land a symmetrical layer of graduated fringe on the opposite side of your hoop. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with my counts of 25. I'm going to come up through the adjacent bead. And take on my next 25 beads. I'll continue that process until I reach the point where we're going to do the decrease, and then I'll join back with you at that point. Here I've added my final row of 25 beads, and it's landed me on the 9th bead down from this edge of my hoop. So I know I needed to save this space for the remaining graduated fringe of my earring. That means I'm going to start with 23 beads on my next fringe, 21 on the previous, and continue in a decreased fashion in the reverse of what I did on this side in order to graduate my fringe up. I'm going to complete the 7 beads on the very end, and then we will tie off and weave in our thread. All right, I'm adding on my final loop of fringe, 7 beads coming through the same bead, and I'm ready to tie off and weave in my thread. So I'm going to come down through this gold bead underneath the white one I just came out of, and there's a little thread bridge right here on the edge that I'm going to loop around through under that gold bead and just create a little whip stitch on there. I'm going to double up on that and then weave my thread in. I'll travel up through the adjacent gold bead, and down through the other adjacent gold bead. Get my thread where it's nice and tight tucked in there, and I'm ready to cut off my thread. So I'm just going to take my scissors and snip. All right, so you'll see that what I want to be the front is going to be on this side. So I'm flipping that over. And what you can do to get the fringe to lay is kind of train the loops all in one direction, and that gives it a nice straight and clean appearance. I'm ready to attach my earring hook. So I'm just going to bring in my chain nose pliers, angle that loop off to the side slightly, make sure that my front is facing forward, slide on the loop of my wire frame, and close it up. So that's how to make the Fresca Beaded Fringe Earring Kit by Beadaholique. Again, we have 2 other beautiful colorways. We've got the Pink Lady version and also Blue Lagoon. These and many other projects and kits are available at beadaholique.com.